On October 3rd, he asked me what day it was. It's October 3rd. Yeah, this video is going out a little bit late because I was at Disneyland on October 1st. So expect that vlog coming to you this week as well. I can't even believe it's already time. This is my first video of October and there's like at least 7 more to come. This is the time when my coven arises to their strongest, their sexiest. And as leader of said coven / cult. Yes, if you're new here, I am the Duchess of the Darkness. I am the Dark Queen. I am your unholy ruler. If you ever felt like, oh my gosh, this soul of mine, it's so annoying, it's so heavy, I just wish that I could give it to somebody. I could be that somebody. Give it to me. All you have to do to transfer it over is click the subscribe button. So super easy, like easiest cult to join in the whole world. And we're also really nice and we won't brainwash you because everyone is allowed to have their own opinions about horror movies here. And speaking of, as you saw by the title of today's video, I'm going to be talking about every movie that I watched in the month of September. I do start with the TV shows that I've been watching, but there's nothing really new there, so we will jump right into the non-horror movies of the month. Then I get into all my horror rewatches of the month, then I get into my new watches of old horror, and finally we will talk about new releases such as No One Will Save You and It Lives Inside. So get settled in, grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's get into it. Oh, first up we have Bottoms, which I actually already did do a solo review of that over on the Patreon. There's a lot of bonus content over there, and so a lot of the newer releases of the last month I will have already talked about over there. But Bottoms was amazing. It was a 4 out of 5 star movie for me. A lot of the comedy didn't really land, so that's why I kept it from being a perfect film for me. But I really did see myself in a lot of the characters. I found a lot of it to actually be really funny. It's 100% the Gen Z equivalent of so many of the female-led comedies of like the 90s and early thousands. It just also has that super frenetic Gen Z TikTok brain tempo to it, so I have also noticed that a lot of people in older crowds have not loved it that much. It's for the Gen Z girls, I think. I really think it is. But I recommend it to everyone. I think that it's already on streaming now. Up next, I rewatched Hot Rod. This has always been one of my favorite comedies, and it's been a few years, so it wasn't exactly what I remembered it to be. But there are some things that you can just see 20 times, and they'll never not be funny. For instance, the scene where Hot Rod falls down a hill for like 10 minutes, or the part where Danny McBride is just like high-fiving them. He's like, and that is how it's done. It's kind of like Napoleon Dynamite, where us city folk kind of get to envision how white trash people keep themselves entertained. I guess that's one of my favorite forms of comedy because I love Napoleon Dynamite too. You know what else will never not be funny is when Bill Hader's character is like tripping on acid and then he's in the car after he like gets severely injured and he's like, whoa, holy shit, man. We just ran over a small bus. Oh, Hot Rod. Yeah, I love Hot Rod. Anyways, I also rewatched all the Hunger Games movies. I just finished rereading all of the books as well as the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I don't know if everybody here knows this about me. Even my devoted cult members might not know that I am obsessed with Hunger Games. I fucking love Hunger Games. They are without question the best YA books ever written. They're still so enjoyable now. I reread them every couple of years, so at this point I think I've read all the books 4 or 5 times, except for Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. That was only my second read. But I am so excited for that movie in November. Holy God. Hunger Games movies, maybe not as good as I remember, except for Catching Fire, which is a perfect film. The last non-horror movie of the month would be The Dark Knight. I usually watch more non-horror, and then I can kind of like fill you in during these videos, because I am a movie fan in general. I don't only watch horror, if you could believe that, but mostly horror in the past month. I mean, it was September. We're leading up to Halloween month, so of course. But yes, The Dark Knight, we got to go see that as it was re-released in theaters, and that was amazing. I hadn't seen that movie since I was a child, since I was a wee little thing that could fit on the petal of a flower. It was basically like my first time watch, and so to see it in theaters was incredible. And the filmmaking of Christopher Nolan, whatever issues you might take with him, the way that he just creates such a cinematic experience, it's so unmatched when you're in the actual theater. There are shots where Batman is like standing on top of a building or something and the camera kind of swoops down, and I was actually experiencing some vertigo. Like, it was kind of making me a little, oh, I felt like I was on a roller coaster almost. The Dark Knight is amazing. I think it's nearly a perfect movie, except that it's kind of like pro-cop. And also, I think that this might be part of Christopher Nolan's kind of tongue-in-cheek thing, because his movies are really funny sometimes, including The Dark Knight, maybe even especially The Dark Knight. There's a lot of really dark humor in it. But the part where they need to evacuate Harvey Dent, and so they evacuate all the hospitals because they don't know where he is, and somehow he manages to be the only person not evacuated from the hospital where the Joker finds him. Like, what the fuck? I feel like I gotta be missing something there, or maybe that's just, it's supposed to be tongue-in-cheek, I don't know. But loved that movie. I love it. And I've still never seen Batman Begins or The Dark Knight Rises, so I have not seen the entire trilogy. I very much need to now. Now for horror rewatches, first up we do have a Jurassic Park, which I'm not gonna get into because I watch that movie minimum once a year. Talked about it so many times, it's one of my favorites of all time. But it was my first time seeing it in the theater because they released it to theaters for its 30th anniversary. Perfect film, and it will never not be a perfect film. So, enough. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit you. I also rewatched The Nun because I was anticipating the new one coming out, and I have realized that I actually really love the first Nun. It's so stupid. Everything that makes it bad is what makes it so good. I'm really tired of having to argue that. There's another example of something that will never not be funny. She fucking spits the blood of Jesus Christ into a demon's face. How do you not roar and ache with laughter after that? I already railed about that in my roast of The Nun too, so that's coming up. Another amazing movie I got to see in theaters for the first time is John Carpenter's They Live, and I don't know if it was just because it was my second watch and I found more to appreciate, or because it was in the theater, but my score did go up from 3.5 stars to 4 stars. I love They Live. I am a They Live truther. Also, John Carpenter sent in a little video, and it was so funny because you could tell that they were just not gonna get more than one take from that man. He was just sitting in his living room. He didn't like dress or do his hair or anything, and he was chewing gum. But what he said was still hella true. He was like, the messaging of this movie is more relevant today than it's ever been. And of course, because the movie is about how money is God now and how the masses are placated as long as they're entertained. Very much the same vibe as The Hunger Games. That also has never been more relevant. Love They Live. I don't know. Let me see actually if I would move that up on my John Carpenter ranking now, because I also got to rewatch Christine, so I guess I'll talk about that here too. And it was exactly as I suspected. I knew that on my rewatch of Christine, I would like it a lot more. The first time I watched it, not knowing anything about it, never having read the book, I hated Archie. Wait, no, is that his name? Who's the nerd? Who's the loser nerd who buys Christine? If his name's not Archie, that's hilarious. His name is Arnie. I'm sorry, not Archie. Yeah, the first time that I watched the movie, I just was so annoyed by him that it really kind of hampered my enjoyment of the film itself. And also, that was over a year ago now, I think, the first time that I saw the movie. Yeah, it was January of 2022, so that was actually almost like 2 years ago. And I was just so pissed. I was like, Hollywood has been brainwashing the most mediocre men into believing they deserve beautiful, intelligent women since the dawn of time, but this movie is especially guilty. Oh my god. Almost as bad as literally any Adam Sandler movie. Movie wasn't that bad though. That is something that I still take issue with this movie. It's not that the main character is unlikable, because that has to be the case sometimes, because in that case then it's like, okay, well, what is the writer or the filmmaker trying to make a statement about with this type of character? So that is not my problem with it, but I do still take issue with the fact that he landed this absolutely gorgeous girl. And I don't know if this is in a deleted scene or something. Would love if one of you could enlighten me. But I really needed to see him actually being charming or actually being really nice to this girl, like doing something to win her over. But as it is, we are not in his POV while that relationship is developing. He just shows up at the football game and all of a sudden he's dating this girl. And that is not enough for me. That takes me out every single time, because I'm like, okay, who, what, when, where, why? Especially why? And especially how? Like, what do you mean? That is the only thing really that just throws me out of the movie. And obviously there's some other stuff that's corny about it, but it's just part of the 80s charm. I love the practical effects of the car in it. There are still some things about it that I'm like, how did they do that? I just kind of end up having to dock the movie several points for that, just for me personally, because it takes me out. I really wish there was kind of a filler scene where we saw their relationship develop more, because it makes no sense to me why this girl cares about Arnie at all. Anyway, anyways, that, what was it called? Was it part of the AMC Fear Fest where they're bringing back John Carpenter movies to theaters? I don't know, but that was amazing. I'm so happy I got to see both They Live and Christine in theaters. Like, oh, life-changing. And speaking of, this is also relevant, I also rewatched The Thing from 2011. The first time I watched it, I really didn't like it because I just was so taken out by the CGI. And I don't know if it's because now I watched it on Blu-ray, or no, did someone send it to me in 4K? I can't remember, but I also watched it on my parents' TV, and they have this like crazy 6K 65-inch like really nice TV, and the image was so good that most of the CGI I didn't even really think twice about this time around. Like, it just, I'm sorry, it did not look that bad to me. And yes, of course, I'll always prefer the practical effects of the original, of course, or that's not the original, but the first remake, John Carpenter's The Thing. But I don't think it's as bad as its reputation would make people believe. I just don't. It's also essentially a remake. I know that's technically not. If you haven't seen it, I guess I won't spoil that. But it really feels like a remake. This time, Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the lead, and could never complain about that. Could never complain about that. And I think the way that they replaced the blood test scene was actually really clever. It was something unique that I don't think I would have thought of. Of course, Mary Elizabeth Winstead is fantastic. I also love the obstacle of having the language barrier between some of the characters. I feel like that helped to heighten the tension even more. I loved it. I actually loved it this time around. And I don't know, it could go back and forth. Some movies for me, it's like a yo-yo effect, where the first time I watch it, it's bad. The second time I watch it, I think it's good because I've gotten past some of the stuff that I thought made it bad, or because now I expected those bad things, I could kind of notice more about the movie. Same thing with Christine, right? Because now that I could expect that super unlikable main character and his confusing relationship, I could kind of get past that and just enjoy more about the other stuff in the movie. But with the yo-yo thing, sometimes then I hype it up too much for myself because I'm like, oh my god, you know, this movie's actually way better than I thought. I watch it again, and then I think it's bad again. It doesn't always make sense, but right now I love The Thing from 2011. I also rewatched the entirety of the Saw franchise except for Spiral, which I've still just been dreading to do. I don't want to do it. But right now I'm currently very deep in my research for doing a Saw deep dive, and so I'm gonna have to rewatch that. It's not really an option. But I've been putting it off as long as I possibly can, and I'm probably gonna keep putting it off a little bit longer. For my last rewatch of the month, I did go see Talk to Me before it left theaters in my area for one last time. I just knew that I would regret it if I didn't go see that movie again on the big screen, because all the really kinetic camera work and stuff, and the music and the sound design, it really was meant for a theater. I feel like I'm not gonna rewatch it for a long time. I do want to pick it up on physical media, probably on like Black Friday this year. I need to now distance myself from that movie so that when I do eventually watch it on a smaller screen, I'm not gonna be disappointed, you know? Now let's get into all my new watches of old horror. Now, I have been watching a lot of Rob Zombie movies, so including his Halloween movies, so I did rewatch those, but I had never seen another Rob Zombie film in my life. So far now, I've also watched House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects. So we've still got Lords of Salem, we've got 31, and then the last one in the Firefly trilogy, what is that one? Anyway, we're gonna be doing some more watch-alongs this October of those movies, I'm sure, but it's because I'm gonna be doing a deep dive of his career. That's gonna be my next deep dive after Saw, so I'm not gonna talk about my thoughts on his movies right now. Just know that you have something to look forward to. Next new watch of old horror would be The Prodigy, and I think that's from 2018 or 2019. A mother concerned about her young son's disturbing behavior thinks something supernatural may be affecting him. Yeah, this movie just was not good. I was not into it. It was a 2-star for me. A lot about it was very generic to me because we have so many movies where, oh, there's something wrong with the children. Wait, a movie was released this year that was literally called that, right? I haven't seen that yet. It didn't really sound that good, but just color me unimpressed. They took a lot of different kind of generic horror stories and just lumped them all together. And I do think the acting of the movie was really good, but that was kind of its only saving grace, to be honest. That child actor, I don't know if he's really gone on to do much else, but I wish he would. Oh, Jackson Robert Scott. Oh my god, it's the same kid from the It movies. He plays Georgie. Holy I didn't even recognize him. Oh my god, because he's playing such a sinister character. And in It, he's like the most sympathetic character. I can't believe I didn't even recognize him. He grew a lot because It was 2017, this was 2019. Crazy. Oh my gosh, how much of a difference 2 years makes for a growing boy. He was in a movie this year called Jesus Revolution. No thanks. No thanks. It's tough when a movie is really generic like that because I just don't have a lot to say. When something is generic, I feel like that kind of speaks for itself. So let's move on to the next one, which is Virus. That movie came out in the year of your goddess and savior, 1999. I don't know what it is with me and my birth year. I'm just obsessed with it. When the crew of an American tugboat boards an abandoned Russian research vessel, the alien life form aboard regards them as a virus which must be destroyed. Simply put, if this is garbage, call me a goddamn raccoon. It was so bad. It's a really bad movie, but I had a blast. I was having a tough time hanging in with this movie for the first like 30 to 40 minutes because it takes a long time for things to pick up, and they're really trying to set up this whole situation and build the suspense, but I just didn't really care that much about it. It wasn't until I started seeing all the practical effects and these like humanoid robot kind of mixture creatures that I was like, okay, I'm in. Not to spoil it, I'm sorry, but that's kind of the only reason why it's worth watching, and I think the only allure of it. And even then, even though that was massively entertaining to me because it involved Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald friggin' Sutherland, it was still quite bad, and a lot of it did drag out a lot, but it is a pretty unique movie. I fully understand why it fell off, why people don't really talk about it. Jamie Lee Curtis apparently has also kind of disavowed it. She's like, no, I did not do that movie. But it's a lot of fun. If you are an 80s horror head and you love the practical effects of that decade, you love the atmosphere of that decade, I think it really carries over into that movie, which is weird because it came out in 1999. Yes, I gave it 2.5 stars, and yes, I also think that it's kind of underrated. If you're in the mood for a really just good, bad movie, then go for it. And skip the first act if you need to. Just fast forward through the first 30 minutes. You're not really gonna miss that much. Up next, we have Attack the Block, which you guys have been recommending to me since I think I started my channel, probably. A teen gang in a grim South London housing estate must team up with the other residents to protect their neighborhood from a terrifying alien invasion. I did want to like this movie a lot more than I did, but I still give it 3.5 stars. I still think that I would absolutely recommend it. I did say in my Letterboxd review, it's like if you put real people into a Steven Spielberg film, and I love Spielberg, I really do. I'm not big on the Goonies though, and so I actually would probably put Attack the Block above the Goonies. I know he didn't direct that, but he produced it, okay? But we do have to admit that, of course, Spielberg's movies reflect his own upbringing, and so they're very suburban, they're very white, like, and all of the kids are very similar to one another all the time. It's not a lot of diversity in Spielberg movies, and so seeing Attack the Block, it was like, oh my god, finally getting sci-fi from a different perspective. And since majority of the world is not from white suburbia, I was like, yeah, I mean, this feels like it actually is real people in a Spielberg situation. And also, if I'm not mistaken, this movie was the one that kind of started to put John Boyega on the map. Obviously, he then got Star Wars after this. This was just a few years before that, but he's fantastic in the movie as the lead. The casting of this was really, really good. I felt like all the boys in this group had insane, amazing chemistry. That's why it was kind of really reminding me of Spielberg. And the framing of the characters is really interesting. Who ends up starting out seeming as a villain that ends up being someone that you sympathize with, and vice versa. In some characters, it's kind of a roller coaster ride how you feel about them the entire time. And while, yes, it is about this alien invasion, I would argue that's not really what the movie is about at all. I think what this movie is really trying to get at is our sense of community, or like the lack thereof, and how we should try to get to know our neighbors. We should engage in community behavior. There's a lot to be gleaned from the movie. It also stars Nick Frost, and he's part of probably my favorite comedy duo of all time, but he's used pretty sparingly, and they really just allow John Boyega to completely steal the show. If you're not from the UK though, you will probably need subtitles though, because their slang and their accents, they're a little bit hard to understand. Up next, we have a movie called Ghost Stories, which I don't even really want to talk about. You know what? This might have to be a new segment that I do as part of these monthly recaps, but I do have an anti-haul of physical media that I've either thrifted or been given over the years that I finally got around to watching, and I'm just not gonna hang on to them. I live in a small space, I have a set amount of shelves, and I'm just not gonna keep movies that I'm never gonna watch again, and Ghost Stories ended up being one of those. It just was really, really slow to get going. It ended up being pretty generic, and it had the most generic twist ending. There is nary a twist ending that is more cliche than the one that they used, and it's fitting because the title of the movie is also very generic. Professor Philip Goodman devotes his life to exposing phony phony psychics and fraudulent supernatural shenanigans. His skepticism soon gets put to the test when he receives news of 3 chilling and inexplicable cases. I would only recommend this movie if you really enjoy a slow burn and you're terrible at guessing twist endings. That's the only time to watch this one, I'm afraid. Now, my last new watch of an old horror movie is good news. That would be Night of the Creeps. This came out in 1986 and it stars Tom Atkins. In 1959, an alien experiment crashes to Earth and infects a fraternity member. They freeze the body, but in the modern day, 2 geeks pledging a fraternity accidentally thaw the corpse, which proceeds to infect the campus with parasites that transform their hosts into killer zombies. There are a bajillion things that you could nitpick about this movie, and I don't care to do any of that. Yeah, it's bad, but it's one of those movies that is just so charming. I was in love with pretty much every single minute of it. 4-star movie for me, probably now in my top 10 or top 15 1980s horror movies. It was sent to me by a viewer, and thank you so much for that. I'm so glad that I prioritized it and watched it so quickly. It is hands down my favorite performance ever by Tom Atkins, who absolutely knows what he's doing there and just gets the tone of the movie because it's ridiculous. It's so campy. It's a wonderful dark comedy. He delivers the best line of the entire movie in the 3rd act. You'll know it when you hear it. We also get to see him in bisexual lighting. I didn't know I would ever get to experience that. The practical effects are so good. They're pretty gnarly. The little slug alien things are awesome. I've seen also that it really feels like a precursor and the inspiration to Slither, which I've never seen, and now I really want to, although I'm a little bit afraid of feeling disappointed after watching Night of the Creeps first. But oh my god, I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. For my people that were nodding along and thinking that they wanted to watch Virus, Night of the Creeps is a lot better, and so maybe watch that one first. Before I get into all the new horror releases of the month that I watched, like The Nun 2, No One Will Save You, all of those, I am gonna go through my anti-haul. Okay, so I had to get up and go grab them. I also have a bunch of giveaways going on right now. If you follow me on my horror Instagram at Haunted Hippie Horror, I do have some really good physical media I'm getting rid of that I'm not just gonna donate. It can end up in the hands of a lucky few of you, but that also involves donating to my short film. You can literally just donate $1. All you need to do is donate more than 99 cents and send me an email of your receipt, and then you are entered to win. You can choose which one you want to enter, so go check that out. These are movies that I wouldn't even dupe you guys into a giveaway with, you know what I mean? So Ghost Stories is one of them. This is probably actually the best of all of these other movies, which is just not saying much because this was a 2-star movie for me. It's not horrendous. It's obviously not the worst thing that I've ever seen, but I just don't want to waste another moment of my life watching a movie that I don't love. I have to watch so many movies all the time that are not good because I'm constantly sifting through all the rubble because it's part of my job. I'm always looking for hidden gems, and you know, the reason why this relationship here is beneficial is because I waste my time and you don't have to, because it is my job. So I let you know about the diamonds in the rough. This just was not one of them. It's just not worth keeping in my opinion. I wouldn't watch it again. Next up, we have a few Blu-rays here, the first of which being a movie called Proxy. This movie I actually don't think is bad at all. I just couldn't finish it because I was finding it to be too depressing. This is a spoiler, but it's very, very sensitive subject material, so this is just a trigger warning, basically. There's a lot of child death in this movie, and also it doesn't really feel like horror. It just feels like this drama that someone wanted to make as feel bad as possible. And I don't enjoy feel bad movies. There are some of them that I recognize are really good. Joker is one of them. I mean, that movie makes me feel terrible, but it's one of the few that I can actually rewatch just because of its relevancy, its commentary on today's world. This is not one of those. This is kind of just the story about a couple of sociopaths, basically. I think I watched over half of it. I watched over an hour of this movie and I just was feeling so terrible. So while it's a good movie and definitely worth preserving, I'll donate it. It'll become part of someone's collection. It's just not for me. I'm not gonna be the person to hold on to this one. Now, Apartment 143 is basically just the Walmart brand Paranormal Activity. Well, no, that's not fair because Paranormal Activity is already the Walmart brand version of Paranormal Activity, but that's part of its charm because you knew that they only had $15,000 to make that movie. It's such a crazy story. And I do like that movie. I like the characters. I like Katie and Mika essentially playing themselves, which is wild. This actually, I don't know. It depends how you feel about Paranormal Activity. This might be an upgrade for you. Not for me personally, it's just kind of generic for my taste. The family is dealing with the loss of their mother, which the dead mom trope, the dead mom cliche, I can't do it anymore. I can't. And while there is one monologue of the movie that is just so utterly fantastic, I don't think it's worth watching the entire movie just to get to that part. I do like the aesthetic of it, which is ironically what a lot of people don't like about the movie, but I think that a lot of those people making that commentary on Letterboxd are also just not fans of found footage in general. It has a really cool kind of grainy quality to it, but those elements alone, that plus the monologue, are just not enough of a reason to watch this entire movie again. I ended up skipping forward to the last couple of scenes, and literally I don't think I missed a single thing, because then came the wonderful monologue that kind of revealed everything about this family's trauma and their past, and then came the climactic showdown, which was kind of lame in my opinion. They used a lot of tactics in generic paranormal movies that just don't work for me. Loud noises, levitation, that kind of thing, and just whatever. So I'm not gonna watch that movie again. You also might have noticed I didn't log a single one of these movies on Letterboxd. It kind of just felt unfair. I'm not gonna bog down my Letterboxd with a bunch of movies that, for one thing, I didn't even finish. But if you've been around, you know me, I don't like doing reviews of movies that I don't like. So that's why they're not on my Letterboxd. It didn't seem worth it. It doesn't seem fair if I didn't even finish a bunch of these movies. So anyways, Cry of the Owl is the only one from this stack that I actually ended up watching the ending of the movie. I did skip ahead a lot because it's one of those really slow burns. This movie is an hour and 45 minutes long or something. Oh no, it's an hour and 40 minutes, but I was excited about this one because it stars Julia Stiles. She's from 10 Things I Hate About You. She's from Orphan First Kill. So I was thinking, oh, this might be an underrated gem because I love her acting. And no, it just was not a well-made film. I was finding myself really bored. It's a slow burn, and it's a lot more of a drama. You don't feel a lot of the horror elements there. So I skipped around. I watched a little bit of the middle of the movie. I watched most of the last act, and it was just as I suspected. It would not have been worth my time to watch the entire movie leading up to the ending because it was so underwhelming. So never gonna watch this in full, just never gonna watch it again. The rest of these movies I did not last very long in, so starting with Batteries Not Included. I was excited about this because it was produced by Steven Spielberg, and there's a little bit of hype around it on Letterboxd. I think that this is really one of those movies you would have had to see in childhood for it to have any meaning to you. Right off the bat, the acting was so bad, the filmmaking was so bad, it just was really distracting and not in like a charming way. I couldn't even make it to the apparently fun part of the movie where there's weird robot aliens and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I will never know, but sometimes you just get a feeling and you just know that a movie is not going to be for you within like the first 10 minutes. That might seem sacrilegious to some people, but watching movies has become one of the biggest parts of my job. If it had anything else going for it, any other elements that even interested me slightly, then I would give it a chance. Because it's not like I have all this physical media of movies that I've never heard of that I'm like, well, they don't seem that interesting, I'm just going to get rid of them. I quite literally give every single one of them a chance. And this was not worth that chance, so it's just not happening. This one, The Fourth Kind, this was actually me trying to rewatch this movie to see what I missed the first time, because the people that like this movie hype it up like no other. They claim that it is so terrifying. I lasted, I think, about 25 minutes into it this time around. This movie is so garbage. This is one of those movies where I just have a block in my brain of being able to understand how someone could enjoy this. I think it's rated at like 11% or like 8% on Rotten Tomatoes or something, and I'm like, that feels right to me. It's so poorly made. The whole mixture of like the found footage and reenactment thing is so stupid. The fact that Mila Djokovic in the opening scene is like, hi, I'm Mila Djokovic and I'm playing this fake therapist, blah, blah, blah. I can't deal with it. So this was me giving this movie a second chance because I know that there is hype for this movie that lives out there somewhere on the internet. Not for me. I can't stand this movie. It's gotta go away. Because I know if I keep it, I will convince myself that I need to give it another try, and I'm just gonna prevent myself from wasting my time. Luna is one that I'm not really gonna spend any time on here because it's just one of those movies that I knew within the first 10 minutes. It was so poorly made to the point where it was distracting. Some of the animation really looked beautiful, and I wish that I could have stuck it out to see more of the animation because the style of it was so gorgeous and seemed really immersive. But then as soon as the live action starts and the characters come onto screen, I'm like, oh, all of you are so boring. I'm not gonna be able to pay attention to this. Like, it just did not seem worth investing the time. And I looked on Letterboxd and it seemed like people pretty much all agreed with that. The last one in my anti-haul before I get into new releases is a movie called The Factory. I've had this on DVD for I think about 3 years now almost. I just get sent so much stuff, and it's only been recently in the past few months that I've prioritized trying to watch these to shrink my collection, only because my collection has grown so much. So it's good. It's pushing me to get through these and to really curate my collection. This one I don't think is even necessarily a bad movie. I didn't get too far into it enough to tell, but it was just the subject matter of it. There is a lot of pretty gratuitous violence against women, and it's just really gritty. The realism of it was too much for me. That's not why I watch movies. Sometimes I can deal with gritty realism if it's in sort of a heightened reality, like The Joker, kind of going back to that. But when it feels so much set in the real world, that's just not why I watch movies. If something's gonna be hyper violent, like a lot of the horror movies that I love, then it's also gotta be in a hyper reality. It needs to be in a universe where I can accept that such atrocious things are kind of normal, because otherwise it just hits too close to home and it makes me miserable. So that's why I'm not keeping The Factory, why I didn't finish it. So that does it. These are all the movies that I am not going to hold on to. You can take a nice little gander there if you would like to. I'm not hanging on to these, and that takes up so much space. This is so much space. This is 8 movies that now I will have more room on my shelves for, and that makes a huge difference when you don't have a lot of house to your name. You don't have your own apartment. I literally just rent a room, so I do not have the space for movies that I'm never going to watch again. So, alright, let's talk about new releases. The Passenger would be up first, and this is one that I did do a solo review of over on my Patreon. This is a movie that I don't want to read the synopsis for, because even on Letterboxd, it totally spoils the first huge twist of the movie. I went into the movie completely blind just because I love Kyle Gallner and I want to support his work. So I knew nothing going in. I had not watched the trailer, and I recommend that you do the same. It's not a great movie. I do think that by the third act, things really fall apart because it just didn't seem like this movie knew narratively where to end. Character-wise, there are some interesting character arcs, and so that's really what you watch the movie for, is going through their journey. But beyond that, I did really feel like it fell flat at the end. I was disappointed and I was expecting quite a lot more. It also stays much more grounded in its drama elements. This is another movie that does not exist in a heightened reality. The only thing that makes it feel kind of off is the fact that you can tell they shot it during the pandemic, because there are a lot of scenes that feel a little bit too empty, that feel like there should be some more extras there. Sometimes it feels like the characters on screen are the only people in the world, when that's not at all the case where they are. So overall for me, it was a 3-star movie. If you want my more in-depth thoughts, then join the Patreon. But while I did not give it a very high rating, I think that it is worth it alone just for Kyle Gallner's performance. A lot of movies are 3-star movies and they're just meant to entertain, and they're not really reinventing the wheel. I would say that that is most movies, so I do still recommend it. Up next we have It Lives Inside, which is one that I have not spoken about. I did not do a Patreon review for that one. An Indian American teenager struggling with her cultural identity has a falling out with her former best friend, and in the process unwittingly releases a demonic entity that grows stronger by feeding on her loneliness. It all starts with a jar, which prompted my Letterboxd review, which is quoting this iconic scene.
I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, and guess what's inside it?
But then again, if you saw my Letterboxd review, you know that I only gave this movie 2 stars. It had such a unique premise going for it. I have never seen a horror movie that's centered around Indian folklore. Although, I don't know if it's fair to call it folklore, because I know that Hinduism is seen kind of variously as a religion, but there was a lot that was unique about it. For instance, I had never heard of this Indian kind of demonic entity. Apparently, in a lot of Indian cultures, people believe that whistling is inviting dark spirits to come towards you. So we got to be introduced to some fun, really different superstitions. The only problem with that is that it was all presented in such a generic way. This kind of felt like a new generation's version of the Bye Bye Man or Truth or Dare, just a real cheesy, really bad teen horror movie. But unfortunately, it lacked the charm for me to be like, okay, yeah, that was so bad it was good. Because that's me with the Bye Bye Man. I'm pretty sure I give that movie like 1.5 stars. It's awful, but I rewatch it at least every few years. I kind of love it. It Lives Inside just did not have that charm. The only thing that kept me really engaged was Megan Surrey, because she's like one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen. So many shots of the movie would linger on her because she's just going through different emotional developments and stuff, but the camera lingers and then there's no dialogue, so you're kind of just staring at this girl. We're also the same age, which for some reason kind of trips me up because I'm imagining myself playing a high schooler and I'm like, absolutely not. But she pulled it off. I mean, she was probably like 22 or 23 when they shot the movie. But why am I talking about this? Why am I talking about this? Oh, well, yeah, because she was one of the only things that was engaging me about the movie, not just because she's gorgeous, but you know, her acting was good. It wasn't great, but a lot of the choices that didn't really resonate with me, I think can be attributed to the directing, because it wasn't just her, it was a lot of actors in the movie that whenever something stressful would be going on, they did my number one pet peeve, where they would portray anxiety and fear as just shortness of breath. You know, I've done it so many times that, you know, when people are like, and also, they did the thing where they take a beautiful girl, but then you know that she's going through it because they try to dishevel her by putting her hair in front of her face. So that's how you know that one of the characters is like really having a hard time. I clipped it back on this side, so I'm not gonna mess with that. But her hair's in front of her face and she walks around and she's like this, you know? I get that cinematically, visually, that's probably one of the best ways that you can go about it, is show a physical change in someone, you know? I just prefer more nuanced and subtle performances. I don't like when cinema becomes theatrical. That's why I've never really been a big musical person, but I love Moulin Rouge because the movie knows what it's doing. It's supposed to be really over the top like that. I don't like when fear in movies is portrayed as super over the top all the time, because everybody experiences fear differently, and it just felt a little bit too one note in It Lives Inside. It was a first-time director though, and I think that's so impressive. I do want to see more Indian American horror movies because it was something I truly had never seen before. But it also happened to be a case where you could kind of tell it was a first-time director. The movie it just didn't look that good. I hate to say that, but it's true. I did not like the lighting. I did not like the cinematography. I didn't think it looked very good. It was not visually engaging. A lot of people complained that the fact that it was PG-13 was what was holding it back, but I don't think that's the case, because there are plenty of PG-13 movies that have been super successful that worked really well for me. Insidious used to scare me a lot more than any other R-rated thing that I had ever seen. So I don't think that's it. I just feel like the movie lacked creativity. If it had come out 20 years ago or something, I probably would have thought that it was amazing, but I just feel like I have seen everything in that movie a bajillion times. The only difference was that it was framed through this Indian immigrant family. So anyways, let's move on. No One Will Save You is up next, and this one I also did give a review on Patreon. That one I gave a sort of a double review with A Haunting in Venice, so again, join the Patreon, check that out. You get a lot of bonus content over there if you couldn't tell already. No One Will Save You, I just wasn't as impressed as everybody else. I think that we've maybe just been really starved for alien movies for a really long time, but people were claiming that it was this groundbreaking thing, I guess because there's no dialogue in it. But I do agree with some people that after a while that became more distracting than anything else, because there are certain scenarios that our character finds herself in where she would talk, where people would exchange words, but it was just such a strangely silent movie. I totally get why a lot of people are impressed with that, because they convey an entire story with no dialogue. Caitlin Denver is incredible. She conveys all these emotions and everything with no dialogue. It's incredible. But after a while, it just became a little bit less impressive. I don't know. Also, people were really impressed with the fact that it depicted gray aliens, as if that's not the most common type of alien we've seen in cinema. I immediately think of Signs and Dark Skies, for example. Signs is one of the most famous alien movies of all time, and I think the top review on Letterboxd was super right when they were like, this is the Home Alone-ification of Signs, because that's basically what it is. And then it completely falls apart in the very ending, in my opinion, because I will admit I simply don't understand the way the movie ends. I think again they just didn't know how to end it. They were writing for a really long time of the gimmick having no dialogue and the fun crazy looks of the aliens and stuff stuff like that. They were relying on that for too long, and then they forgot to close it out narratively. But in terms of a character arc, I do think that is pretty complete, more or less. But narratively, things get kind of messy. It gets a little bit confusing for me. Anyway, again, join the Patreon for my thoughts on that and A Haunting in Venice. I'm not going to get too much into that one here either. Basically, that one was also a 3-star movie for me, and I do actually recommend both of them. Neither of them are a waste of time. I think that you'd be completely entertained by both movies, but just not reinventing the wheel, not doing anything super impressive in my opinion. A Haunting in Venice, the best thing about it is Kenneth Branagh's direction, which I never really thought I would say that, and also his performance, because we get to know more about him as a character and he has his own arc finally. I'll be honest, he was a major reason why I did not like his first 2 Agatha Christie adaptations, is because his character annoyed the hell out of me. This time around, I really liked him. I loved the spooky setting of it. I think that that was absolutely what his, I don't know, could you call it a franchise? It was what they needed, because the style of it, the location in Venice, oh my god, I was obsessed. None of the characters you really care about. A lot about it is pretty predictable, but definitely worth watching the one time, and I'm really, really glad that I saw it in theaters. Saw X, I did do a full-on, unscripted ramble review a couple of days ago, so check that out. That being said, we will close off with The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. Vicaria is a brilliant teenager who believes death is a disease that can be cured. After the brutal and sudden murder of her brother, she embarks on a dangerous journey to bring him back to life. So this is a modern and black retelling of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I was super, super excited for this movie because, again, sort of like with Attack the Block, I'm like, you know, I've seen these movies before, but I haven't seen them from different perspectives. This one was really, really interesting right off the bat. I thought the first act set up so many different interesting things, so much commentary being made, both on the schooling system and just like being black in America. But then none of those open threads were ever really closed. There were never any complete thematic arcs, which really bummed me out, because I did watch several interviews with the cast and crew and with the director, and they were talking about their gratitude for being able to make the film because they don't get to tell a lot of these stories from the black perspective. And I just kind of feel like they put all their eggs into one basket. And by that I mean they just threw in so many ideas that unfortunately I didn't feel like a single one of them was fleshed out completely. So much about the first half of the movie had me gripped, and I couldn't wait to see how the Frankenstein element was going to tie into that. And maybe it's because I'm not black that there's just some stuff that I will not be able to piece together on my own. But I did see a good majority of the reviews on Letterboxd agreeing with me that it felt like it just was a bit incomplete, that they just threw everything at the wall to see what would stick, and unfortunately just didn't follow through. Because by the third act, it just turns into a really generic kind of sci-fi movie. Light spoilers, but if you know Frankenstein, then you already know. I mean, that story's old as dirt. It just turns into kind of the classic, oh, there's a monster loose, we must destroy it. If I had to guess, and I do kind of have to because even after watching their interviews and stuff, this wasn't really explained because it's a spoiler, obviously. Not a big one though. I'm not spoiling the story, but I'm just talking about the themes. So if I had to guess, I think what they were trying to go for is just the impossibility of being a black person in this country. I think the Frankenstein monster was just kind of like just representing being a black man in this country. So by the time you get to the third act and everyone has the common goal of just trying to chase down this monster and destroy it because it's killing, it's causing havoc, you kind of lose sight of the commentary because on the one hand, it's just very generic. And then on the other hand, it's such a direct metaphor that it's like there's not that much to explore with it. And if that wasn't the intention, I would love to know anyone else's interpretation of it. I could definitely use some outside perspectives, especially on this one. But regardless of all of that and me not really liking the movie and feeling like everything was half-baked, the performances were fantastic for one thing. And for another, the direction was phenomenal. I believe that they shot it on 35mm, if I remember what he said. And I would be super excited to see whatever this director does next. I think that this was his first feature as well. So very similar actually to It Lives Inside, where now we have the perspectives of people of color, just with very generic stories. Both first-time directors, and both of them, I'm excited to see what they would do next, and hopefully something maybe a little bit more original. Unfortunately, we do have to end this video on not such a positive note, but hopefully you did get some good recommendations today. You probably noticed these names scrolling on screen. I have mentioned them many times today, but they are my lovely lovely patrons. Let's just take a quick look at everything that I talked about today and how many of these movies got bonus content over on the Patreon. Bottoms, The Passenger, No One Will Save You, and A Haunting in Venice. So that's 4 bonus reviews just in the last month alone, not to mention all the copyrighted watch-alongs that got blocked from YouTube that now live there. And then there's also some behind the scenes with my deep dives, as well as updates for my next production, my next short film. So yeah, join them. They keep the lights on at Haunted Hippie Studios. We love the patrons. Mwah. If that's not for you, all the rest of my social media is also listed down below. As I said, follow me on my horror Instagram. I will be very active on there this month. You'll get teasers for the vlogs that are coming out this month, like the Disneyland one, the Horror Nights one. I'm gonna be doing a little Burbank Halloween store Spirit Halloween vlog haul at some point as well. And over there, you always know what content is gonna be coming out soon, and whenever there's gonna be a live stream. So it's a good place to be. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye!